I think it would. If it says explicitly children are not allowed, then I do think it would change the circumstances, because then you're clearly halachically precluded from allowing the child to go there. I think the Imrei Yaakov had said that at some point explicitly in the Biurim.
Maybe I missed that. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And then as far as saying if you break it, you own it. Again, I don't know if that's going to be sufficient, because an individual is not held liable for damage that's caused by his child.
Right. That's the basic principle. So.
Right. That was the whole premise of our discussion.
Right. Okay. Great. Thank you very much. Sorry I missed yesterday.
Sure. Okay. Okay. So we are up to. Here, let me just share the screen. Sorry. So we are up to Sif Gimel. And what we saw yesterday, that it's just like you're allowed to prevent water from entering your property by diverting it, and by diverting it, it'll hit somebody else. But once it's on your property, you're not allowed to remove it off your property and just have it go on someone else's. The same thing is true conceptually, that if damage has already befallen me because I've already been implicated, I can't exempt myself by saying place the burden or place the onus on somebody else. And so that's why we got into this discussion of a person is basically trying to exempt himself from paying tax when he knows that he's already been assigned to pay a certain tax or a certain penalty or a certain responsibility is placed on it, and he's trying to get out of it by saying give it to somebody else. See, because if you know that somebody else is going to be burdened with it, you're not allowed to alleviate the burden from yourself, so just so that it could go on somebody else. And that has to do with taxes, and it has to do with, let's say, government burdens. Let's say they want to knock down my house because of laws of eminent domain, so they're going to build a subway or a highway or something like that. Okay, I just saw Barry requesting that we send the next 20 pages. You got it, Barry. We'll take care of it. Thanks for the reminder.
Thanks, I print them out and make notes, so so I do it in time.
Thank you for the reminder. Yeah, we're on page 19, 100%. Okay. So great. So we saw yesterday that that's only true if you're not allowed to go over to the tax man or to the military person who's coming to collect food for his platoon of soldiers, and you're not allowed to go to him and try to say, please don't come to my house, there's plenty of food in someone else's house. But then he said, we saw yesterday in the Imrei Yaakov, is that if the officer or the tax collector comes over to you, and in the course of your conversation with him, he takes a liking to you, and you want to be able to say, would you be able to exempt me from this requirement, then that would be okay. But, and also we also saw that in Makahal Kvarnit Pashui Masar, right? And if the community already made a deal with the official, and in other words, the city had said, this is what we're going to require. We're going to require 100 rubles, and that's the total. It's not per person. It's 100 rubles total. And then the officer then says, afterwards, he says, and you, sir, will not have to pay the tax, so that he reduces it now from 100 down to 90. So then this fellow who was exempted does not have to share in the burden with the rest of the city anymore, or the village. So now that the burden has been lowered, he shouldn't feel guilty that he hasn't contributed anything. He's allowed to basically say that this is a gift that I received, and via Hashem ultimately, and therefore I am off the hook. And the Rav Shulchan Aruch had said that anyone who tries to exempt himself and thereby placing the burden on others is called a masur. And now we see what he writes over here. This is where we're up to in Sivkat and Tes Zayin. Ve'ein hevdel ben yachid letzibur. There's no difference in this regard between one individual and a community who acts this way. The gam la kahal asar ligrom im hamelech lechabram le'iza kahal o lahafridan. That one community can't try to influence the government official to say, don't come to us, don't build a highway through us. Go to the guys next door to us and build a highway there, or have your platoon encamp there and eat from their food. Im hadavar mazik lachem, it's going to be a lie. By doing that, you're causing liability to others. V'im asu kain yesh lahem din masur. It's possible for an entire community to have the din of a masur. NIMBY, not in my backyard. Ach rishayin lomar anachnu mu'atim o kedoma lazeh v'hamelech yaseh ma sheyirtzeh. What they are allowed to say to the king is, without suggesting that he goes somewhere else, they could say to him, but sir, Mr. Government official, we're such a small village, and we probably won't be able to feed you adequately, right? Or we are such a not nice neighborhood, we won't be able to do an adequate job at having the highway run through here, or whatever reason they say, the topography of the soil is not conducive to making a flat road, or however they're going to say it. But if they come up with an excuse as far as why they would not be good candidates to have, this inconvenience imposed upon them, so then they're allowed to do that, and let the king do whatever he wants, as long as they don't say go somewhere else. That they're not allowed to say. Od kasav sham harama de kahal shapatru echad mimisim patur b'chol divrei hakahal einan tzrichim kinyan. And in the same context, the Ramah in the Shulchan Aruch writes that there's a general rule that anytime a village exempts a person from paying taxes for whatever reason, then there's no official kinyan that is required. That person is ultimately exempted, and he can be exempted just by a declaration that he doesn't have to pay his taxes. Okay. All right. So let's go on to the next sif. I think we have the general gist of what's going on over here.
Sorry, Rabbi, I do have one question on that as well, and
yeah.
that is, if you divert to non-Jews, I presume that's not a problem?
No, I don't think that there's any there shouldn't be any distinction here between Jews and
So I thought that Masr is like to hurt other Jews.
Trying to see, I mean, it has to do with, this is causing damage to somebody else. I don't think that the laws of damages are different between Jews and non-Jews in this respect.
Okay.
I don't think so. I don't think that I'm allowed to cause damage to somebody else, even to a non-Jew.
Right. I hear it about the eavesdrops and stuff like that, but I'm just wondering about if it's government officials and you're pushing them off Jewish property onto non-Jewish property. Is that any different? And maybe it's not. I don't know.
I'm not sure if we have any indication that it's different. Let me look around and see. I'm not sure. I don't think that there should be any difference. Normally, we don't say that there's a difference unless there's an indication in halacha. But when it comes to damages, you're not allowed to cause damage to Gentiles either. So I don't know why. I don't know why it would be different, unless we saw something explicit in halacha. So I'm not 100% sure. I think we have to work under the assumption that this halacha would be saying, but it could be you're right, Paul. I don't know. Maybe maybe there's something covert here that we're not being shown. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Sif Dalid. B'chein melech osar shematil eze davar al ashir echad o al beis. Let's say there's a king or some other government official or military official that has imposed a burden upon one specific wealthy man or two specific wealthy men. V'yesh li Yisrael echad koach behechal hamelech v'hasar lihishtadel lepotram. And there's a Jew who works in the higher up in the government, and he has the ability to find a way to get that burden removed from them. However, in the course of getting that burden removed from them, that burden will be placed upon somebody else. Im hadavar barur bevadai she'im yifotram le'elu yatil al acherim eno rashai liishtadel lepotram. If you know that by removing the burden from these two or this one person, then you know for certain, he says you have to know for certain that the burden will then be transferred onto somebody else, then you're not allowed to do that. V'hu she'ehim anashim yeduim lamelech o hasar uparat osam bigzerato. But this halacha is only stated when the king has named these people by name, or the government has named these people by name, and therefore what you're trying to do is get the burden removed from them and placed on somebody else. Aval imlo parat al anashim yeduim el yatsa'a hagzeira milafanav lahatil al bet anashim bistam. But if the government has not implicated specific individuals, but rather a decree was made that individuals, who are the wealthiest in the community, shall have a burden be placed upon them. Areza rashai lihishtadel al eze isho anashim shirotze shelo yiyu bichlal hagezera. Then someone, a Jew who works in the government, does have a right to reflect and prevent his friend from not being implicated and not being counted in that burden. Even if he knows that in the process of having his friend not being named, someone else will be named instead. And the reason why that's okay is shekevan shelo parat al anashim elu adain lo ba hanezek alehem urashai ledachoto b'misha rotze lahatzilo. He says, because since his friend was not implicated already by name, it's as if the damage has not yet come onto his property, and you can divert it therefore before it hits him, right? Just like you can deflect it from yourself. So conceptually, making sure that Ruvain is not implicated in this unique kind of burden that the government wishes to place before Ruvain is named is perfectly okay. Just like you can set up sandbags in front of your property to divert the water that hasn't yet hit your property. So I hope you appreciate conceptually the analogy, right? But once Ruvain has been named, to get the burden taken off of Ruvain and invariably to be dumped on somebody else is like tossing out the water after it's already hit your property and letting it fall on someone else's property. So that you're not allowed to do. Okay, so that's the differentiation that's drawn over here. And so let's take a look at the Imrei Yaakov. And
Rabbi, just a point I'm thinking of some real day analogies. But let's say, for example, you have somebody, let's say, like Mark Zuckerberg, who's the owner of Facebook, and let's say there's and he's a Jew. So if there's people and the government's trying to go after him, or his company, because of the things of what Facebook has this monopoly or whatever other various reasons they're going after that company. So if there's some high-ranking U.S. officials who can help him and his company, would that fit into this sort of scenario?
It depends. It depends what their motive is for doing it. If they want to help Mark Zuckerberg, because Mark Zuckerberg has paid them a lot of money or given them a lot of opportunity, and they therefore use that influence to try and have Mark Zuckerberg deflected from what the normal law would require in antitrust laws or anti-monopoly laws. So then that's wrong, because they're going against the law that was designed in the United States to protect small business. So there's a different immoral issue going on over there. Here, we're talking about where the government is within its rights to impose, let's say, eminent domain over one particular individual, where they need to build a new road. So they basically are going to decide where this road is. The road could go a couple of different places. Let's say they're going to extend the subway north past Finch. And the question is, where should they build the subway? So it can go, or where should they put the new stop? It can go here, it can go there, and a person wishes to divert it from going on his property, because he lives right near Young, and he's hoping that they'll move it a little bit further east, let's say, so that it'll go to Bayview. Before the government has made its decision, you're allowed to plead your case and explain why you feel it would be most beneficial for the city, for the community, to divert it and have it go further east, because you don't want the traffic in your neighborhood, or for whatever reason it could be. And you're perfectly within your rights to do that. But once the government has already decided that it's going to be in your neighborhood, it's not considered to be moral to try and get it diverted to somebody else's neighborhood. Even if you can come up with good arguments, but you're basically doing the same thing from a moral point of view. You're getting it off of your property only to get dumped on somebody else's property. So again, it all depends on the like in the case with Mark Zuckerberg, if he falls into the category of anti-monopoly laws, and someone is going to try and look the other way and disobey the law, the standard that is placed on every company of that size, simply because they stand to profit, then that's clearly immoral and probably asur al pi halacha as well. I hope that's answering your question, Ron. Anyway, okay. Let's go on to the Imrei Yaakov. Sar shetzarech Yehudim la'avodato umevakesh me-Yehudim sheimseru lo ezen ne'arim. So he says, let's say you have a government official who needs to conscript, I think is the word for drafting someone to government service, whether it's the military or some other service. And he's looking for Jews to give to him young men in their community to be part of this conscription. V'yesham ne'arim kalimu prutzim yicholim lihishtadel al nar kasher shelo yikhu oso. And the community sees that there's different types of young men in the community. There are some young men who are innocent and God-fearing and frum, and then there are other kids in the community who are the bums, that they don't like to stay in davening or the base medrash, and they're up to no good, and they're into drugs and stuff like that. So it is permissible to try and influence the conscription officer to take the kids who are not God-fearing. provided that they have not yet implicated specific names. Avalim kvar ba hapakuda al echad, kashe laharot lihishtadel avuro, ta'al yedei zeh gorem sheikhu acherim, ba'ayin likutim kan. He says, but if the government has already said, okay, we want this kid and this kid and this kid, and we see that one of the children that or the young men that they've chosen for conscription is Reuven, and Reuven is an outstanding scholar, and he's a God-fearing boy, and we're worried that by the government conscripting him, he's going to lose his Yiddishkeit and so forth. It's very, very difficult to say that there's anything permissible or moral even about trying to get that conscription order removed from Reuven if you know it's ultimately going to be placed on somebody else who's less savory of a character. Because that's really problematic, even though your intentions are noble because you want to save pure and innocent Reuven from a life of debauchery and lack of religion. But that's but the fact of the matter is that every person is equally precious. Perhaps there would be a very important differentiation between Jews and non-Jews. I would agree in that situation.
I mean, if you could say that Shmerel, who's like a bum, would get benefit from being in the army or whatever, that would make a man out of him, would that help? Like you're it's bad for Reuven, but it's good for Shmerel.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's that's why he says it's kasher lahorot lihishtadel avro. Very difficult for us to be able to find a heter. He says, take a look at the Likutim. Perhaps we'll research this a little bit further. Eino rashai lihishtadel potram. He says you're not allowed to make any attempt to get these people exempted if you know that they've already been implicated. Lav dafka liftor acherim, elohu adin liftor atzmo nami kain dena rashayim kvar patra hamelech. He says that it's not just to get other people exempt, but even to get yourself exempt. In other words, the halacha is the same. To try and exempt yourself from any type of burden by having it dumped on somebody else is going to be usher. Unless the king already chose to exempt you, that'll be a different story. But to try and get yourself exempted when the king has already implicated you by name is not going to be permitted if you know that if it gets off of you, it's going to be placed on somebody else.
Rabbi, what about all the Jewish boys back in the 60s who were getting drafted into the U.S. Army to go over to Vietnam? And many of them made them way even into Canada. What were the rabbis telling those boys then?
The rabbis were telling those boys, I believe, and it wasn't just in Vietnam, it was probably in World War II as well. If there was a guy who was a yeshiva bacher, he should try and get out of service. That's what some of the rabbis were doing. But it's important that, I had a Rebbe when I was in yeshiva. His name was Rabbi Yaakov Kolevsky of blessed memory. And he refused to dodge the draft. And he got drafted. And he was a big Talmud Chacham. But he wouldn't shirk his duty to his country either. So he got drafted, was in the war. And I think he maybe worked in the kitchen as a cook. And at night the legend was that he would go under a pot with a flashlight and study Torah. I don't know whether that's true or not, but that was what they said about him. But the fact is that he did do his time, and you think about a person like that and you say, well, I think that's very admirable. The question is, halachically, is it permissible for a young man to dodge the draft? And I think that the answer is not so simple over there, because it's not clear that by you dodging the draft, somebody else is going to get chosen. Maybe the government will decide that they've already filled their quota without you being part of the draft. Maybe the war will end by the time you get shipped off. There are a number of different factors that could come up in real life, which might make it more permissible for a person to try to get out of the draft even after his name has come up. Okay?
Also, Rabbi, what about the fact that it would possibly there's certain situations, like using Vietnam again as an example, where you're fighting a war that's not even really necessarily defending your country. You're
That's
defending
right.
so-called democracy. So
Right. And what if exactly if it's an immoral war, you could become a conscientious objector. Yeah. And do whatever you feel that you need to do in order to try and get out of doing something, which in itself, being conscripted, is the immoral act. So that adds complexity to the shaila. I totally agree. All right.
Well, not to get political, but in Israel, it's going to be a much different thing. And we've got the issue all the time about yeshiva students and should they go to the army or not, and other Jews instead, and fighting for the country. And certainly, I know this is a huge political discussion, but then a lot of those dynamics change.
Right. And so, actually, there's a piece in the Likutim down here that we'll get to Mirz Hashem next week. That we'll talk a little bit about serving in the Israeli army and the draft and things like that, and how it relates to this particular halacha. But since we just have a few minutes left, I wanted to talk about Mondays for just a moment, if that's okay, and just think about what we're going to do for Mondays in general. I'm certainly open, if the Chevra would be open to this, to do a 6 a.m. Starting time on Monday mornings instead of a 6:30 time, and we can get in at least a few minutes. I think the minyan starts at 6:15 a.m. on Monday mornings, and so if you wanted to chop a few minutes before the 6:15 minyan, I'd be happy to do that for you on Monday mornings. Or we can just, you should also remember that when we started this class, the original plan was to make this shir a 6 a.m. shir when people, before COVID, it's ancient history. We don't even remember what life was like before COVID. But we were all getting up a lot earlier, if you remember, back in the day. And our days were starting earlier because we had to drive to work and things like that. So I'm not saying that you should come up with a vote right now, but give it some thought, because I don't really see a great solution for Monday mornings right now because of my duty to give the Moreh Nevuchim shir at 7:30. I might be able to get that shir moved to 8 in the morning for the future, but even then, not sure if moving it to 8 would actually alleviate our issue, because of my obligation then to be at a, it might alleviate it somewhat, because then I could go to a 7 o'clock minyan. If I went to a 7 o'clock minyan, or 6:45, which starts now at 6:45 in the shul, then perhaps we could start on Mondays at 6:15. We would have a few minutes before I run off to shul. I would go to the 7 o'clock, and then I would start my Moreh Nevuchim shir at 8. But I probably won't be able to do that until later. In other words, I'd have to probably wait until after the Yom Tovim to see what's going on. So in the meantime, I think we should just skip Monday mornings for now, and we'll just resume on Tuesday morning. I think it's a little bit too complicated for now.
Rabbi, how far?
Sorry, Ron, go ahead.
How far away are we from getting back into our routine of 6 o'clock class and 6:45 minyan right afterwards?
It's a great question. I don't know. I don't know. I think, first of all, I think it's a subjective answer. A lot of it's going to depend on you as individuals, how you're going to vote with your feet, right? Because right now we have a 6:15 minyan, we have a 6:45 minyan, we have a 7:15 minyan. We have all the minyanim set up, but people simply aren't ready yet to come back to a shir. It just people are simply not ready yet, by and large. Is the Daf Yomi meeting in person yet?
No. Well, one person, the Rabbi Rothbard is there at the Bayit. I think one person sort of happens by, and then he has to put his mask on. But the vast majority, all of us, the rest of us are. The other problem with the Daf Yomi is its time has changed as well. Because if you recall, there used to be 2 Daf Yomis, and now there's only the one. I'm sorry?
Yeah.
It used to be at 6, but
Yeah, it
also at
used to be 6.
8:15, right? So there was more optionality. The question I have, Rabbi, is it the link, not having a Zoom link that's a problem, or is it the rabbi's time?
It's actually my time, because right now the Mor Nevuchim shir is at 7:30. So what I do is I daven at the 6:15 minyan. I'm done by around 7. That allows me to get home and to sit myself down and to prepare for the shir.
Right.
If I get home by 7 or 7:05, and then and when we're able to sit, we still would be limited. Even if I got you a separate link, we would only have about 10-15 minutes anyway.
Is that all we have at 6 as well?
Yeah, we'd probably only have a few minutes at 6 as well. So no, but if we started at 6:15 and I went to a 7 o'clock minyan and I started the Mor Nevuchim shir a little bit later, then that would give us more time. But I don't think I would implement that until this semester is over of Mor Nevuchim, which probably won't be until after Rosh Hashanah and the holidays.
Right. Okay. So it sounds like we're skipping Monday for some time. It doesn't seem like there's an immediate solution.
I think we'll skip Monday for now until between now and the Chagim, and then after the Chagim we'll come up with a permanent solution. Okay.
As permanent as anything is these days.
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully we come back to the shul for our class.
Well,
Exactly.
I'm one personally who hates change, and it's like every week is a different miser, but still we'll figure it out. Thank you, Rabbi.
Let me wish you all a good Shabbos. I do have to get going.